Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Cece and today's video is an update on my Outlander read along. I have just finished book 4 in the series, Drums of Autumn. I loved it. I have lots to share about it, so keep watching. So in this video, I'm going to talk about a couple of key things that happen in the latter half of this book. I already did a video about the first half of the book, so this is just kind of the second half. So I'm going to talk about ghosts in this book, not the ghost you think, a different ghost. I'm going to talk about reunions of characters. Some characters are reunited in the latter half of this book and it's wonderful or it's tragic. And first meetings. So we meet some new characters in the latter half of the book. Some characters and first meetings. We meet some new characters at the latter half of this book that go on to become really important. And some characters that we've, as the reader, have known for a long time meet each other in person for the first time. So I'm also going to be talking about those kind of first meetings and how they go. I'm going to have a little bit about the First Nations or the Indigenous people in this book and young Ian. Everyone knows I'm crazy for book version of young Ian, so I have a little bit to say about that. He's my main crush, so I'll be sharing my thoughts. I'm also going to talk about some stories that seem to kind of end in this book. Diana Gabaldon writes each book as a standalone, so you could just read Drums of Autumn and you wouldn't be too lost. I think you'd catch up relatively quickly and the book would end and it would be a satisfying conclusion. Although there are more books in the series if you want to keep reading. So there are some stories that I noticed this time that do kind of wrap themselves up, and that doesn't mean we won't return to them. It just means that they are a little finished, which I liked and kind of noted. I'm going to talk about Claire and Jamie, of course, the main couple. I think the main couple in all the books, and some troubles that they have in their marriage and how they kind of work through it. I always really like to read those sections. I feel like I learned a lot, so I'm going to talk about that. And then I'm just going to give kind of my overall thoughts and impressions of the book as a whole. So the first ghost that I'm going to talk about, when I think of ghost in Outlander, of course I think of Jamie's ghost from the first book. That's not the ghost I'm talking about today, although there's a lot to say on that topic. Today I'm going to be talking about Frank's ghost, Frank Randall. So he is a major character in this novel, even though he's dead for the entire thing. And most of it takes place 200 years before he was even born. So that's kind of amazing, the role that he plays and how important his character is. But because, I mean, he's Brianna's dad. He raised her from birth till 17 or 18 years old. So although she's meeting Jamie and having this father-daughter relationship with him, Frank is really, he played a major role in her life and was a huge influence. He was her parent. So I think that's part of the reason why he's such a big deal. And then we also see with Claire's marriage to Frank, I mean, they were married for like 30 years or something. So although it wasn't always sunshine and roses, they did have that bond. I think if you live with and care for someone for that long, that, you know, you're bound together forever. So Frank's ghost plays a large role in this. First of all, both Claire and Jamie and Brianna really all talk to Frank in this book, or all kind of feel his presence in the story, which I found really, really interesting. So Jamie talks to Frank kind of near the end of the book when he offers Claire back Frank's wedding ring. So Claire has always worn 2 wedding rings since her marriage to Jamie. One, a gold one from her marriage to Frank, and then a silver one that Jamie gave her on their wedding day. And even though she marries Jamie and, you know, they fall in love and everything's great, she doesn't take off the ring from Frank because, you know, she didn't stop loving him. He didn't do anything to her, right? It was just this, you know, amazing coincidence that she traveled through time and they were separated. And so she had to move on with her life, right? So she wears that ring. Obviously, when she goes into the future, she's married to Frank. He is her husband. He cares for her. And, you know, their daughter, Brianna, he considers Brianna his daughter as well, even though there's no biological relationship there. They're married. So she's always worn this ring. In the first half of the book, Stephen Bonnet tries to steal her wedding rings. I think she puts them in her mouth, and she manages to save Jamie's, but he gets Frank's. Just kind of, Stephen Bonnet is a violent man, and he gets Frank's ring. Of course, later in the book, Brianna sees that he has Frank's ring. She recognizes it, and she gets it back for her mom, gives it to her, and Claire keeps it a secret from Jamie because she doesn't want him to know that Brianna and Stephen Bonnet had this run-in, or Brianna doesn't want him to know. All of this comes out, of course. It's a huge problem, disaster, relationships, really damaged. Anyway, Jamie keeps the ring, and at the end of the book, he offers it back to Claire. She doesn't bring it up. And Jamie is kind of a jealous man, which I guess makes sense. His wife was with another man for, 20 years. I guess he has a right to be jealous. It's not unfounded, even though he sent her back to her. Anyway, he offers it back, and, they're kind of discussing it. And Jamie kind of says, even though I've never met him, I feel him. I feel like I know him, or I know something of him. And his daughter was raised by Frank. His wife was cared for by Frank. So really, I think there is kind of this debt of gratitude, and you do know someone by the people that they're surrounded by. So I just thought that part was really, really cool. The other person that kind of talks to Frank, of course, is Claire. So Claire kind of has a few moments of exasperation, or in dealing with Brianna, right? She kind of talks to Frank in some of those moments because, of course, when she was raising Brianna, Frank was the other parent that was there. So I think it's kind of that thing of no one can understand your family except the people in your family, right? So no one understands your kid like their other parent does, who also has to deal with their bizarre behavior and idiosyncrasies and these weird things that your kid does, right? And so I really appreciate those moments where she kind of feels like Frank is looking over her shoulder a little bit, or just putting in his 2 cents about something Brianna's going through. I really, really liked that. The big moments in Bree's life that she kind of feels like Frank is there. So Brianna gives birth to her son, and after everything's all good, she's fine, baby is fine, everything's good. Claire kind of leaves the room eventually and is cleaning herself up or whatever. She kind of talks to Frank in that moment too, because it's his grandchild as well. If he had stayed, if he had lived, if he hadn't had that heart condition, if he had lived, Brianna would never have come back to the past, and he would have been there for her first baby. So very cool. So I think it's very cool that Frank is kind of there for those moments, and he's kind of this ghost. The other part that Ghost Frank has to play is this letter that Roger found, written to Reverend Wakefield from Frank as kind of part of his last confession. So Frank was Catholic, and he confesses in this letter to the Reverend that he does kind of believe Claire's fantastical story of time travel, because he's found some evidence of this James Fraser, and he's not going to tell Claire because I think he couldn't stand his wife going back to the past. And what would he tell Bree? What would Bree find out while he's alive? That was a big deal to him, that Bree not be told that she's not biologically his while he's alive. And there's lots of, I think that's very valid, especially because her birth father, her biological father, isn't reachable, right? So he confesses all of this to the Reverend in this letter, and he says, I put a gravestone in St. Kilda's near my own relative, Jonathan Wolverton Randall, big character in the first book and second book, so that, if they ever go looking, they'll see this stone, and that might spark an investigation. But he's kind of leaving it up to fate, but then he's kind of pushing it. By leaving this gravestone there, he's kind of indicating that you know, he's opening the door for Claire and Brianna to kind of do their own research and see if they can, you know, if they want to, or if Claire wants to try and find him. You know, she kind of has that ability. He's left the door open for that. So I thought that was really interesting. And Roger recounts the letter to Jamie word for word from memory. So it really feels like Frank is talking in the book. It's in Frank's voice. It's in Frank's way of speaking. So I really thought that that was very cool. So those are the ghosts. There are other ghosts in this book. Ottertooth is a ghost in this book, but he was in the first half. I think I kind of already talked about him. And yeah, so those are the ghosts. I like the ghost of Frank. Eager to see if he's more present in the next books. I can't remember. I haven't been interested in Frank really before, to be honest, but this read along, I'm more interested. So yeah, I'm gonna keep an eye out for more of Ghost Frank. Okay, so this next section is gonna be kind of confusing because I'm doing reunions and I'm doing first meetings. So I guess I'll do first meetings first and then I'll do reunions, and hopefully I don't get too confused. So first meetings, obviously the most important one, the biggest one in this story is Brianna and Jamie meeting for the first time. I really liked how Diana wrote this scene as that Brianna knows who he is, but Jamie doesn't know who she is. So she kind of finds him in this back alley, peeing against a wall. So not a romantic scene at all, right? Like not like a very emotional start, but Brianna is feeling all the emotions. She was told, oh yeah, James Fraser, you're looking for him? Oh, he's just in the back. So she runs back there to find him. So she's expecting, right? She's expecting to see him. Of course, he has no thought in his head that she would ever be able to travel to the past and meet him. So he kind of thinks, you know, hey lady, what do you want? You know, I'm married, you know, oh, keep your distance, or, oh, are you starving? Like, do you need help? Like, I'll help you, I guess. Meanwhile, Brianna's just like so shocked. She's seeing him, she's looking at his features, seeing herself, right? Because she's expecting to. He doesn't see himself in her because he's not expecting to, right? So it's an amazing first meeting. She cries. It was funny, he very quickly like takes charge of her. So I thought that was interesting, very in keeping with Jamie's character. Not super in keeping with Brianna's, but I guess she wants him to do that because she wants him to take her home to see her mom too, Claire, obviously, right? Yeah, so that was one first meeting. Another first meeting that I don't think I talked about in the first video is we meet Lizzie Wymus. I love the character of Lizzie. She is Brianna's like bond servant. Brianna buys her indenture, like her papers. I think she very quickly rips them up when they get to the New World, but I'm not 100% sure about that. And Lizzie is described as like, she's 13 or 14 years old, tiny, you know, timid, quiet, like, you know, little mouse-like, but just so sweet, such a sweet character. And she's a big mistake in this book. But I just love her. I think she's so wonderful. So yeah, so those are two first meetings that I really, really enjoyed. Another first meeting in this book is Brianna and Lord John. So these are two characters that we as the reader know pretty well, but they meet for the first time when Brianna is staying at River Run with her Auntie Jocasta, and Jocasta kind of lures Lord John to see if she can get Brianna married off before she has her baby, because that was a thing of the time. So Brianna isn't going for it. She's waiting for Roger. She kind of ropes Lord John into her scheme, and he kind of says, you know, oh, I'm going to take care of you. You know, you're the child of my best friend, Jamie. And they develop a real like cute friendship as well. They kind of mutually tease each other. Lots of mutual affection and respect. So yeah, I really liked their first meeting, and I liked kind of their hijinks that they get into together. I thought that was really fun. Okay, so some reunions. Brianna and Roger, they are reunited. They're reunited twice. They are reunited right at the start of the second half of the novel when Roger meets up with her in the bar. He's been looking for her. She doesn't know he's in the past. He's been kind of tracking her down. that was a cool reunion. She's definitely shocked. Brianna goes through all the emotions, right? Like, she's angry he came because she thinks the only way to get back is to have someone you love on the other side that you kind of focus on when you go through. And he was going to be that person for her when she wanted to come back. But she didn't ask him about that. She just went ahead and did it. And he says there's another way to go back anyway. He couldn't leave her in the past on her own. It's not safe. He just wants to be with her. So yeah, that was a nice reunion until their huge fight. Because Roger wasn't honest with her. He kept a big secret, in trying to protect her. She does not see it that way. It's funny, it really falls along gender lines here. Jamie and Roger both think that he did the right thing, and Claire and Brianna both think that he did the wrong thing. So yeah, I think he did the wrong thing too. I think it's too big a secret to keep, especially if you want to be married to that person. If you never see them, maybe it's not a big secret, but if you want to be married to them, you can't keep a big secret like that, right? Because it'll come up again and again, and every time it does, you'll have to tell a lie. And so I just think I don't think it was feasible for him to have done that. So yeah, they have that reunion. Then they have a reunion at the end of the book. So after Brianna is back on Fraser's Ridge, Roger eventually, after a long time of thinking, too long, I think, he comes back to her and says he's not going to go to the future. He wants to be with her. He wants to stay married. That reunion, very emotional. He kind of makes a pledge that he's going to be the father to her child. There's some doubt as to whether it's biologically Roger's or not. And of course, no one will know until much later as the child ages, if it resembles Roger or doesn't. But yeah, he pledges that, this is my son, and I'm going to be your father. And that's very beautiful. But the reunion between Bree and Roger is very awkward, and it seems to take a couple of weeks for them to get back on kind of even ground. So yeah, those are kind of the reunions that happen. Lizzie and her father, Mr. Wymus, are reunited at the very end of the book, which I really enjoyed. He was also indentured to America, but she didn't know where he ended up. So it's kind of amazing that they find each other. Jamie and Claire buy his indenture, which they, again, of course, tear up. Being indentured is kind of like being a slave, I guess. But if you're indentured for a certain amount of years and then you're free. But of course, Jamie and Claire don't agree with slavery or owning people. So they set them free right away, but they keep it quiet. So yeah, I liked all of that quite a bit. Bree and Claire are also reunited in this book. I almost like that more than her meeting Jamie. I did like her meeting Jamie, of course. It's like the main action of the book is Brianna traveling to the past and meeting with her father. But Claire is the one who knows her, right? So she's getting to know Jamie and Jamie's getting to know her, but Claire is the one, she's her mom, right? She knows her. So I thought that reunion was really nice. And these two women both have kind of these modern sensibilities that Jamie and the people around them don't really understand. So definitely an important relationship. And I was really happy with that reunion. So I also want to talk about the First Nations and young Ian. I think I talked a lot about the First Nations or the Indigenous people in the first half of the book because they're very present in that part as well. But of course, in this half of the book, we say a goodbye to young Ian. He is adopted into the Mohawk tribe. And it's funny, in the TV show, I think they play this as very like sad or kind of scary. But in the novel, we don't see young Ian kind of offer himself up like we do in the show. But it's clear that it's his choice in the book. And it's two-pronged. Part of it is kind of an atonement for what happened with Roger. Ian's the one who misidentified him and got him, abducted by the Mohawk in the first place. So he kind of owes him one. And of course, young Ian has fallen in love with a Mohawk woman named Emily. And her First Nations name is Works with Her Hands. And it's very clear that they're in love, into each other. she's certainly not going to leave, so he needs to come to her, and this is kind of how he makes that happen. So I just thought that part was really, really lovely. And we see young Ian really mature, I think, in this stage. Like, you know, he left his home. He left Scotland, not his choice, but he wanted to leave. He wanted an adventure. And then he was with his aunt and uncle. They take care of him. And he's been going out more and more with the Indigenous people. Like, he's got friends among them. So he'll go out hunting with the other men from the tribe, or, you know, visiting the village for several weeks. But he's always coming home to Jamie and Claire. And now I think he's kind of reached that stage of adulthood where he wants to be out on his own. And so this is how that happens for him. And yeah, I just really like that. I really like seeing young Ian kind of grow up. Even though he's not maybe a central character of this story, again, none of it's told from his perspective. But yeah, I just really enjoyed seeing him kind of on the sidelines, growing up, gaining some maturity, and taking charge of his own life a little bit. He's been a victim of circumstance quite a bit, but this seems like a choice that he has made. And he didn't have to make it. Jamie would have stayed, but of course that wouldn't have worked out. So yeah, I really like that part. So that kind of leads me into my next bit, stories that end or kind of seem to wrap up. So the young Ian storyline is one of them. I think in the next book, The Fiery Cross, I don't remember how much young Ian is in it, but like, I really can't remember. It's terrible. But his story kind of wraps up, right? We know he's been adopted by the tribe. He sneaks a letter home at the very end, saying he's married to Emily, they're expecting a baby. Everything just seems like, oh, check, great. You know, young Ian kind of taken care of. So that storyline seems to wrap up. The Lord John storyline seems to wrap up. He's kind of had this adventure with Brianna, pretending to be engaged, not really engaged to her, helping her kind of plot and work things out. And then he's just back off to Virginia. Everything's good. But I think we might see him again because he's been popping up more and more. But again, storyline kind of wrapped up, not much more to say. Lizzie's story, I think, could be wrapped up as well. She wasn't a major character in this book, but from the time we meet her till the end, she has malaria and she's looking for her dad. She's alone, other than, you know, the Frasers, who are her employers, I guess, and friends, but employers. And at the end, you know, she's with Claire, who can treat her malaria. And she's reunited with her father, and he's going to come back to Fraser's Ridge with them. So her storyline kind of wrapped up. Maybe she'll be, you know, a secondary character that we kind of see from time to time, but it doesn't seem like a big one. That might change. I don't know. No spoilers for future books. But yeah, I was happy to see that. So I also just want to talk about Claire and Jamie's relationship in the second half of the book. So, of course, it comes out that Brianna is pregnant and not really married. She's handfast to Roger, but I don't think she even tells anyone that. She doesn't tell anyone that in case he doesn't want to stay married to her. That way he can kind of leave. So it's nice, I guess. But yeah, so she's not married. She's pregnant. That is not okay in these times. Not okay at all. And furthermore, it could be Roger's, but it could also be Stephen Bonnet's, the man who raped her. She's not sure. There's no way to know. Of course, this situation creates a huge fight amongst the three of them. Brianna and Jamie are really going at each other. He's, you know, he calls her a bunch of horrible names. She says some horrible stuff to him. This is before he knows about Stephen Bonnet. Then Claire chimes in and shows Jamie Frank's ring, which of course he knows was stolen by Stephen Bonnet. This brings out the Bonnet story, and Jamie is so incredibly angry with himself. If only he had not let Bonnet go, right? If he had turned him in the first place, in the first 100 pages of this book, he would not have raped Brianna. He would not have terrorized Claire, stolen, all their resources, all of this. So Jamie is so angry with himself. Claire kind of misinterprets this as anger towards her for not telling him right away, but it was Brianna's story to tell. She didn't really want Claire to, so it really put her in a tough position. So anyway, the two of them plus young Ian go off to find Roger, who Jamie and Ian sold to the First Nations people to get him far, far away, thinking that he was the man who had raped Bree, but of course he wasn't. So they go on this trip, and it's tense amongst all three of them. Claire and Jamie are not speaking. They're not sleeping together. They're not interacting. Only the bare minimum to get through this trip. And Jamie is so angry at himself. He thinks Claire is angry with him, that she won't forgive him either, because he wasn't a proper man. He didn't defend his family. He made some huge mistakes. And it's all his fault. Of course, it's not his fault. It's Stephen Bonnet's fault and no one else's. But that's not how he sees it. Claire thinks that he's really angry with her for not telling. So yeah, they kind of are on this horrible trip, trying to get Roger back. They don't think they'll be successful. Who knows where he went, right? They have to really track him down. It's very difficult. And Ian is the one who says something to Jamie, or to Claire. He says, can you not forgive him? he really messed up, but he feels horrible. Can't you see that? And Claire's kind of what are you talking about? Forgive him. He's mad at me. And he goes, no, he's not mad at you. He's mad at himself. So I thought that was really interesting, that it kind of takes Ian chiming in with his 2 cents, even though he's, half their age, not married, to kind of point out to her, hey, you need to go talk to your husband and work this out. And so they do, and it's all it's all mended in the end. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And later in the book, so they're keeping secrets from each other. I think that's the real problem here, right? They're not really being honest, right? The day that Claire and Ian beat up Roger and sold him, Claire asks, what were you doing? Your hands are all torn up, is everything okay? And he lies. He lies to her. He says, oh yeah, I was angry about some things. I hit a tree, kind of an elaborate story. Then it turns out that wasn't true. And Claire doesn't tell Jamie that she has, her ring from Frank back and, what had happened. So they're both keeping secrets. At the end of the book, they're not doing that anymore, which I think, I don't know the secret to a happy relationship, but I think big secrets like this are not healthy. And at the end, they're not doing that so much. And I don't know, what was it they said when they got married? They can have secrets, but not lies, I think. So you can have things that you'd rather not talk about, or that aren't yours to share or whatever, but you can't lie to each other. And I don't know, maybe when you've been married for that long, at this point of the story, I want to say they've been married about 10 years. They've been together and been married for about 10 years, because it was 3 years in Outlander or so, in France and whatever. And then this was 2 years or 3 years. And then the previous book is when she returned. So that was a year. So I don't know, maybe not quite 10 years, maybe 5 to 7. Maybe they just kind of forgot that. With Bree's arrival, right? They want to be really careful. And yeah, so I'm happy that they come back together. They're honest with each other. And it was really interesting to read, about this huge fight. They fight a lot in all these books, but I don't mind. I like reading about it. I think I think it's handled very well, and they do it very well. Okay, so my final thoughts on this book. I really enjoyed reading it. It was an easy read for me. It is 1,070 pages. I want to say I finished it in about 7 to 10 days. yeah, maybe 10. I think I finished in about 10 days. It's summer, so I have lots of time to read. I read pretty consistently. And yeah, I really liked it. I liked how fast paced it was. I like how much action there was. We meet some characters, we meet some kind of new people, but not too many. I don't love it when we meet like 10 new characters at a time and I have to try to like remember who they are and decide if they're important. I feel like everyone we met in this book goes on or is a really important part of this story. So I enjoyed meeting them. I thought that was really cool. And yeah, I just loved how the relationships deepen and change. There's some distance, you know, we kind of have, we leave this book and we kind of have our two main couples and these four characters that we're now really, really invested in, right? We have Jamie and Claire, and we have Roger and Brianna. And there's some tension, but there's also a lot of love, right? Claire and Jamie obviously love their daughter very much and would do anything for her. I think Claire loves Roger. Jamie doesn't. Jamie thinks he's kind of useless and isn't too impressed. So, and Roger, I mean, I think there's some kind of baseline of mutual respect there, but Jamie beat him to a pulp and sold him to the, sold him up the river, like literally sold him up the river. So I don't think they're besties, right? I think there's got to be some stuff to be worked out there, right? And then Brianna and Roger are brand new parents. And there's some relationships that have to kind of be worked on and mended and figured out. So yeah, this book wrapped it up nicely, but I'm of course excited to go on and read the next one, The Fiery Cross. I'm going to start very shortly, probably tonight. I have it sitting by my bed. I meant to start last night, but didn't. So yeah, lots of more exciting things in the Outlander world to keep me on my toes. Anyway, if you like this video, if you have any thoughts on this book, book 4 in Outlander series, Drums of Autumn, please comment below. Let me know what you think. Thanks so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you're an Outlander fan like me, hopefully it was fun for you. If you're just a friend of mine who's watching to be a good pal, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And I'll catch you in the next one.